Part 4. Ains sped through the streets. The warm wind filtered in through the slits in his helmet, blowing over the location which corresponded to his eyes. Perhaps if he had eyeballs, he would be blinking non-stop, but Ains lacked any sensory organs, so all he felt was, "The wind is blowing." Looking down, he saw the earth flying past him beneath his feet, like a loosed arrow. He did not know if it was because he was close to the ground or because of some other reason, but it felt like he was moving faster than he actually was. Of course, he was not frightened in the least. Still, every time his body bounced up, he reflexively channeled more strength into his legs. Although Hamsuke could maintain its balance well, it was still a Jungarian hamster, albeit a gigantic one. Ains needed to spread his legs wide to ride it, and this unstable riding posture was compounded by a lack of reins, barding, or a saddle. Even someone with extraordinary balance like Ains had to be careful not to fall off. "It'll be hard to swing my swords while riding Hamsuke. Perhaps I should have a set of riding tack and barding made for it soon. The head blacksmith's making a decoy suit of armor. Perhaps I could get some help there." It was not just the unsteady ride which brought that topic to mind, but also because of the shape which rode beside him. Nabril was mounted on a horse while staying in line with Ains. She rode a statue of animal, warhorse, a magic item which summoned a massive destrier in heavy plate barding. She was a dazzling sight, skillfully guiding her gigantic horse as it galloped down the city streets. Her ponytail swayed in the wind, and her brown cape fluttered out behind her. The way she sat tall in the saddle was as though she had come straight off a movie screen. In contrast, Ains rode a giant Jungarian hamster. How could he even compete? He looked forward, despair filling his heart, and saw a group of men there. They were a team of 4 people, and they seemed better equipped than the members of Swords of Darkness with whom Ains had traveled with earlier. Ains tucked the matter of the Swords of Darkness into the corner of his mind, letting go of his complicated thoughts concerning that issue, and then studied the horses those people rode. They were majestic beasts. Ains was no equestrian, but given that their coats gleamed and their bodies were in fine fettle, they should have been superior horses. The 4 mounted men rode in a formation shaped like an isosceles triangle, and they too looked like they had sprung from a movie. "I must look like an idiot riding Hamsuke. I certainly feel stupid enough." Ains was quite depressed, but he seemed to be the only one who felt that way. "That's an impressive-looking creature you're riding there." Those words came from one of Igvaj's comrades as he tried to strike up conversation with Ains. Unlike Igvaj, there was no hostility in his voice. Instead, it would seem Hamsuke had piqued his adventurer's curiosity, and his words were filled with wonder and awe. "What manner of beast is that? Is it famous?" "It is the wise king of the forest." What? That legendary monster?" The staring man's eyes went wide as he exclaimed in surprise. "I still can't get used to that sort of reaction. Do they have to make such a big deal over a hamster?" Out of the corner of his eye, Ains could see Hamsuke waffling its whiskers in pride, and its ears twitched in time with the movement. It was probably paying attention to Ains's conversation, given the way it was shuddering under him. Ains mercilessly chopped Hamsuke on the head with his gauntleted hand, which produced a deep, reverberating sound from the creature's skull. "No, I just heard Igvaj talk about it." "I see, he's seeing red again. How did he describe me?" Forget it. You don't have to tell me. I can guess from the looks on your faces." My apologies. That guy. He's not really a bad sort, but he gets blinded by what's in front of him sometimes. It's a wonder how you guys have stayed safe with a companion like that. Or has this party changed out a lot of members? No, everybody's been with the team ever since it was formed. That guy's a pretty good adventurer, unlike what his personality would suggest. Pretty good, huh? Ains turned to Igvaj, and received a hostile glare in response. You guys must have had a really hard time, Ains snorted. Then, after dropping that line, he raised his hand, indicating that Nabril should suppress the anger building within her towards Igvaj. Ains did not want to start a fight here. There were more important things which had to be done at this moment. After signaling to Nabril, Hamsuke raised its head. "Milord, your servant's head hurts." Tears sparkled in those black, beady eyes. Ains felt a twinge of regret. Perhaps he had used too much force. Still, it would have been bad if he had been tossed off at those speeds. He would not be hurt even if he hit the ground. Ains had once conducted an experiment with one of the vassals who had similar damage reduction to his own, and it had not felt any pain even after being dropped from a height of 1 kilometer. The problem was what would happen if his traveling companions began having their doubts about Ains's toughness. Now that they had come this far together, Ains was sincere about getting along with them until the very end. Run more evenly. I don't want to have to use strength when clinging to you. Understood. Milord must be worried about his servant's body. This time, Hamsuke teared up because it was moved, and Ains ordered it to watch its front. It was then that Igvaj's companion from earlier addressed him in a respectful tone. Oh, that's amazing, to think you can maintain your balance in such a precarious position. This would be pretty dangerous, even for someone with a good sense of balance like yours. No. It's because I'm used to it. Though I do intend to have it fitted for a saddle soon. A harness, huh? I don't really like that. Just a jape, of course. If Milord desires it, then your servant has no objections. Under Nabril's reproachful gaze, Hamsuke scrambled to display the attitude befitting of a loyal vassal. The vibrations coming from beneath Ains's waist were different from the tremors of travel. Ains furrowed his illusionary eyebrows beneath his helm. There's no need to frighten a hamster with killing intent, is there? While I do appreciate that sort of loyalty, isn't that going a bit too far? It's fine to look down on human beings, but there's a time and place for that sort of thing. She doesn't quite seem to grasp that concept. Was she really designed that way? There's not much which can be done if she's like that, but just having Hamsuke with him was a huge boost to his fame, and the combination of the wise king of the forest's staunch loyalty to himself was far different from the fear it inspired in others. The first would make people think highly of Ains and consider him to be a noble adventurer. Although it did not mean much to him, he wanted to continue developing in that direction since he had the chance to do so. This was also because he wanted to be regarded as a hero. In addition, it would be helpful to have people outside of Nazarick swear loyalty to him. That made Ains reflect on his actions, and he considered that he might have been too rough towards Hamsuke. Therefore, he lightly patted the place which he had chopped just now, as though stroking a small animal. "Milord, this is embarrassing." The sound of grinding teeth was clearly audible to Ains through the galloping of horses. "You're part of the reason I'm doing this, no? Speaking of which, how hard are you grinding your teeth anyway? If she's really jealous, then I should do something for her, right? Nabril's been very loyal too, but what kind of reward can I give her?" As Ains agonized about whether to give her a ring or some other treasure, Igvaj spoke in a thoroughly unfriendly manner. "Oi, Morn, we're here." After indicating that it understood, Hamsuke gradually reduced its speed. Unlike a horse, Ains could communicate directly to Hamsuke. Ains had no equestrian experience and was not at all confident about stopping a horse. "It's a little embarrassing to ride Hamsuke, but I should be glad because I don't have to ride a horse." Still, the time might come when I might have to do so. I should probably practice that a little in case of emergencies. Ains leapt off Hamsuke, then petted it in gratitude. Nabril transformed her horse back into a statuette and the men tied up their horses. Then, let's go. What formation should we take when moving? We'll take the lead, you can follow behind. I don't care what you do, just keep us in mind and be careful. After hearing Ikvaj's annoyed response, Ains led Nabril and Hamsuke into the forest. Much like the forest near Kani village, the woodlands here bore no signs of human habitation and were very difficult to traverse. However, Ains was festooned in magic items and thus it seemed like a flat plain to him. In addition, his anxiety over Shaltia made him quicken his pace, to the point where Ikvaj had to ask them to slow down. Well, he did ask them, but his crude words were full of hostility. Nabril, who was walking beside Ains, very nearly turned around to rebuke him, but Ains forced her to keep quiet. We're almost there, act like an adult. Ains smiled under his helmet as he saw the frustrated look on Nabril's face. By now, Hamsuke had sensed something amiss, and its ears twitched continuously, as though it had heard something. Ains knew what had prompted that response from Hamsuke, and so he whispered into Hamsuke's ear. Stop that. What? My lord, what are you? The sound of metal you might have heard is from my subordinates. Pay it no heed. Yes, it is. My apologies, my lord. By the way, have you picked up on anyone following us aside from that? He had ordered Negredo to establish surveillance and had taken many other precautions besides, but he asked again just to be sure. No, other than that, almost nobody is following us. Oi, what's happening up there? Asked the man who had been riding beside Ains. Since the team's representative Ikvaj was not asking that question, his presence here need no explanation. Ains waved a hand, indicating that nothing was wrong. Really? The man did not seem happy with that answer, but after sensing that Ains did not want to talk about it, he shrugged and did not press the matter. Well, it's not like I hate you or anything. Ains merely thought those words without speaking them as he silently advanced through the forest. After they had traveled some distance, the sound of weapons being drawn one after the other came from the rear. Ains halted and leisurely looked back. Is something the matter? Is something the matter? You're on point, you should be more alert. This was the first time the other men showed their approval for Ikvaj's hostility. Oi, you, hiding over there, come out slowly. Ikvaj was shouting at a tree which was large enough to hide a person's silhouette. Amidst the growing tension in the air, Ains calmly walked over to that tree. A somewhat panicked voice called out to him, but Ains paid it no heed. Nabril watched like it was the natural thing to do. Hamsuke had his doubts, but he did not offer any opposition. As he drew close to the tree, someone stepped out from behind it, as though in response. The person in question was dressed in a suit of full plate armor which was the same black as Ains's own. That person held a gigantic axe, a bardiche, which radiated a sickly green glow. The commanding presence of this warrior filled the scene with a stranger. Or rather, only parts of it were filled with strangeness. Ains gently raised a hand and said, "Thank you for coming all this way." "Thank you, Ains-sama." The warrior Albedo bowed respectfully to her lord and master. Then, Shalta, who is she? Is she a friend of yours? And what's this about Ains-sama? These loud questions bombarded Ains from behind, one after the other. This was an entirely understandable reaction for Ikvaj and his crew, but it was an unpardonable offense to Albedo, who was still bowing to Ains. Fiery rancor blazed within her heart, and then she let it out, as though she planned to incinerate everything in the area with the flames of her wrath. Hamsuke shuddered, every hair on its body standing on end, more than ever before. Given that even a bystander had this sort of reaction, how much worse must it have been for the targets of Albedo's fury? Their faces had turned white and oily sweat cascaded down their foreheads as they realized that their insignificant lives would be snuffed out shortly. Allow me to introduce you to everyone. This is my companion Albedo. Ains-sama, I find it hard to believe that you would consider me a companion. After all, I am but your loyal servant. That is true, so I take those words back. She is my subordinate. Does that answer your question? Then, Albedo, commence the next step, as we planned. The men were still staring in stunned silence as Albedo walked towards them. Oh, I almost forgot. My name is not Morn. My real name is Ains. Not that you need to remember that, of course. Albedo smiled smugly as she beheld the confused looks on the men's faces. However, that smile was as icy as the grave. Then, Albedo, deal with them. Take one alive. No, another one might be good as a spare. The jamming is already in place, so you can go AEAD and use magical communication. Just as the shock from hearing Ains's calm and dispassionate orders began filtering into the minds of Ikvaj and his people, Ains continued his instructions. Take their corpses back to Nazarick. If they're strong enough, we can use them for experiments in making high-tier undead. Understood. Albedo slowly raised her weapon, the gigantic axe. There was no murderous intent or hostility in that action. That was only to be expected. After all, to Albedo, chopping off the heads of inferior life forms, humans, was little more than cutting the leaves off a daikon. If this were not Ains's order, she might not even need to swing her weapon to verify her calmness. Ikvaj and his party might not have understood the situation, but they still knew they were in danger, and they raised their swords in preparation to fight. Bathed in looks of shock, Ains merely shrugged. Ah, sorry about that. I misspoke back in the guild. When I said, following me is certain death, I actually meant, if you follow me, I will kill all of you. Single quote quote dot. Thus did Ains pronounce their death sentence. I warned you, but you would not listen. These are the consequences of your choice. Accept them with dignity. Ikvaj and his group chose to retreat. The reason why they had all immediately fallen back without so much as verifying the plan with hand signals was because they understood the vast difference between their respective battle strengths. In addition, they did not retreat as one, but they split up to flee, in order to maximize their chances of survival. Their reaction was outside the scope of Albedo's predictions, and she was a moment too late to respond. Although her physical attributes far exceed those of Ains, chasing an enemy through the forest was still quite troublesome. She chased down her first target in an instant, and rendered him unconscious with a capturing-type skill. Albedo's keen hearing picked up on the sounds of metal mixed with the wails of the fleeing men. However, she could not get an accurate fix on their position due to the trees blocking her line of sight. In addition, people without metal armor would only make noise when they stepped on grass or twigs, which only made it harder for Albedo to pinpoint their location, given that she lacked levels in Ranger and Rogue-type classes. Albedo shook her head and sighed. Then she issued a command. Mare, deal with those two. Right. Eliminate the man who was disrespectful to Ains-sama.